Chili can have so many different flavors. Everyone seems to make their own version and have so many different things that they could put in it. Some like to put coffee or beer or even chocolate to try to get that deep, wonderful homemade flavor. I like to keep it simple and really basic. That's why this basic is one of my favorites and something that I've grown up with my whole life. A few simple steps can make all the difference to make this chili go from bland to extremely delicious. To start, I like to of course use dried beans. It's a lot easier, I know, to use canned, so if that's what you like to do, go ahead and just skip this step. But using dried gives a lot more depth in the texture of the chili, and the beans actually are a lot better. They don't come out just all mushy and just kind of go into the chili and be all gross. So to start, I use some cranberry beans, some pinto beans, and a few kidney beans. You can adjust the amounts if you like one bean more than the other or just want to use one bean all by itself so you don't have to buy all three. I always have them on hand, so I like using the different varieties. Put them into a pot and then put the water on top with some salt. Just bring it to a boil, cover it, and then pull it off the heat and let it sit for at least an hour. This is going to help the beans in their cooking. Otherwise, they would take way too long and the rest of the chili would be way too done by the time the beans would. While the beans are sitting, we can start getting ready our chili powder. You can of course use pre-bought chili powder, but usually to me it doesn't have a lot of flavor and it really isn't that great, so I like to make my own, and it sounds a lot more complicated than it is. I like to use just a variety of dried chilies. Some have heat and some more have a smoky, deep flavor. This really adds to the depth of the chili. Just start by opening them up and taking out all the seeds that are inside from smoking them. And then put them onto a pan and right into a preheated 425-degree oven. It's only going to take a few minutes for them to puff up and kind of get soft in the oven, and this really brings out their natural flavors and oils. Remove them from the oven and just let them cool before moving on. To finish off the chili powder, once the chilies are cooled, just kind of break them up, nothing in a good uniform fashion, just however, into a food processor and put a little bit of oregano in. Pulse the food processor a few times just to incorporate the chilies and then turn it on high and let it go for quite a while. This can take a few minutes to really start to break down the chilies and get all those little pieces into a fine powder. If you're finding that your food processor is either too big or you don't have enough powder to really break it down, just move it over to a small spice grinder. That can also work. Once it's at a fine powder, you can just set it aside and move on. To start the actual chili, I like to use a Dutch oven, and a bigger one is always better, and as you can see, I picked one that probably wasn't quite big enough, but if you have at least a 6 to 8 quart Dutch oven, that's the perfect one to use for this. To start, I just place a few tablespoons of oil in the bottom of my Dutch oven and let it heat up. And then chop fairly fine a large onion. Put the onion in and just saute it just to soften it and get a little bit brown and create some good flavor on the base. This really helps start all the flavors come together. At this point, if you don't want just a vegetarian chili like I do, you can of course add in your meat. A good roast chunked up and browned would be great here, or just a good ground beef would be perfect here. Once the onion is sauteed and softened, I like to add a little bit of tomato paste to the bottom of my Dutch oven. Stir it around and let it cook off its raw flavor that can sometimes be a little bit tannic almost. And once that's cooked off, just add your tomato juice. Now, I'm using homemade tomato juice that I can every year from the garden, so it's a little bit thicker than store-bought. If you're buying your tomato juice, I like to buy crushed tomatoes and use those, or even blend those to create a thicker juice. If you don't mind a thin juice, you can of course just buy the pre-done store-bought tomato juice and go with that. Once you add your juice, you can finish by adding some finely chopped red pepper and some jalapenos. If you're worried about spice, take out all the seeds or just use a green pepper in place of the jalapenos. That won't have any spice but will still give you some great flavor. Put all that right into your chili and stir it together. At this point, you can put in the pre-ground chili powder. If you're using store-bought, you can put that in also. I just think making your own really adds an amazing flavor that you can't match. Now, to finish this off, this is a little bit odd part, but this is something my mom always did and now I always do. Add a little bit of rice to your chili. This is really what helps thicken the chili and really soak up any of those extra liquids. It's not a lot, just a few tablespoons can make all the difference, and then the outcome is a nice thick chili, which is what I like. And a little bit of brown sugar. I think it's really important to bring out the sweetness of the tomatoes and all the other flavors by adding a little bit of brown sugar. It has a little bit of molasses in it, and that really adds a great depth of flavor. Stir all that in to incorporate. Once again, make sure you have a large Dutch oven, because if you're anything like me, you always end up having too small Dutch oven and it gets too full. So having a larger one really helps the cleanup process later on so you don't get any splatters on your stove. And then at this point, it's usually about time that I can drain my beans. Make sure it's been at least an hour, because that's really what helps them cook better in the chili. Just drain them off and then put them right into your chili. Now just comes the waiting game. It's starting to smell so good, but you really need to let it sit and simmer for quite a while so all those flavors meld together and that the beans completely cook through. Because at this point they would be way too hard and just would not be good at all to eat. Once your chili is ready, it's just a few quick things to finish it off. I like to add a little bit of reserved jalapeno or green pepper if that's what you're using from before. This just adds a good fresh flavor and crunch to the chili. And for a little bit of brightness, a little bit of vinegar. I think at the end, adding a little bit of acid to a soup is really important, especially when, like a chili, it's been cooking for quite a long time. Sometimes the flavors can almost meld together too much and you don't get a lot of brightness from it. Adding this at the end just adds a good bright flavor, and don't worry, you don't notice the vinegar, it just adds a good finish. Serve it up with whatever your favorite items are. The options are endless, and I know everyone out there has their own version of what the perfect topping is for their chili. But I hope you're inspired to make this fresh and simple, delicious, basic chili, because it is one of my favorites. If you like this video, make sure to click like below and leave a comment, because I love to hear how you guys are using these videos in your own lives. And if you want to see more great videos, click subscribe and you'll be part of the Gray Boxwood family. I love hearing from you and seeing what all you're doing with my recipes for inspiration. Can't wait till next time.